This episode of Bookworm is brought to you by Headspace. Unlock all of Headspace free for 60 days by going to headspace.com/bookworm60.
So I did a thing, Mike.
What'd you do?
I collected ideas, and then I thought about them some more, and then I wrote them down, and I sent them to you, which is exactly what I think you asked me to do.
Yes, there was a little bit more detail in the homework for the life theme cohort. I think that's what you're talking about, but
Yes,
you got the gist of it.
I did. I did my thing. I did my homework. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. Is I did my homework to the life theme cohort. I'm not gonna explain all the ideas and stuff because you need to be a part of the cohort. But it was an eye-opening experience, and I've not really done that exact process. So kudos to you for making me think more than I originally wanted to think. Good job, sir.
Now I got to know what was eye-opening about it.
Mostly, like I've known a lot of the things that I love to do. Like there's some stuff that's like no surprise. Like I love running sound for different events. I was not necessarily aware that like some of the stuff I love to do is like helping people solve their problems. Like some of the short-term stuff, like why is my goat not taking a bottle? Like, well, I grew up around cattle and pigs and stuff, so like I kind of have some pretty good guesses as to what's going on. So sharing that knowledge with people helps solve their problems. Like that just is that's a very weird example now that I'm saying it out loud. But something about that, I love doing that. But I've not really connected the dots that is a recurring theme until you made me stop and think about it for like a week. So
Awesome.
yeah. Didn't realize some things about myself until I did this. So good job.
Cool. Thanks. Hopefully the other 4 weeks will be just as enlightening. Since you're talking about it, I'll just mention two things. One, the life theme cohort. I'll put the link to that in the show notes. If people do want to jump in, I'm leaving it open for now because I have, as part of this first round, lifetime access. I'm not going to do that in future versions of this, but basically it's the lowest price it will be. It's going to go up from here. Someone asked me what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. I just know it's going to go up. And I'm going to basically do them a couple times a year. And so if you jump in now, even if you can't go through it now, you get access to the future cohorts for free. And then the other thing is that we edited the audio, but the gist of that first session, which went really, really well, we released that as this week's Intentional Family episode. So if people want a feel for what it's kind of like, you can listen to that episode, and I'll put a link to that podcast episode in the show notes as well.
Cool.
But it was a lot of fun. When I started, I thought there's no way I'm going to fill an hour. And of course we went an hour and 20 minutes and I had to cut something.
Yep.
So But yeah, it was cool. A very interactive group, very international group. That was kind of cool to see. And it was a lot of fun. Everyone was very engaged, and that makes it easy as a presenter. So glad to hear that you got a lot out of it, and I hope everybody else did too. Looking forward to the other sessions.
Just having read some of the feedback that people have put in the circle community for it, like I would say a lot of people got a lot out of it. But that's me. I'm not going to put words in their mouth. Just saying.
Awesome.
It's good. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go. I've now done my follow-up right out of the gate because it was a big deal. How about you? I know you got 3 things here.
That's true. That was your action item, was committing to that life theme cohort, and you did deliver.
Yep.
Down to the wire, but you did deliver.
Hey, I got it done. Nobody said it had to be done super early. It just had to be done.
Yep. I saw the notification come in about 10 minutes before we recorded. Post from
it was maybe 20.
So I haven't even had a chance to see what you put there yet, but
it's okay. It's okay. I just gave away one of them.
Yeah.
You'll get
it. So I had 3 action items, all kind of related. Define my rich life. What does a miserable life look like? Who is the person you don't want to be? I have kind of failed at these, but sort of also took action on them because this was inspired by the previous episode, The Pathless Path, which has gotten me to think differently about what I want to be when I grow up. And I guess at this point, it will be public knowledge, but especially by the time this publishes, that I am leaving the day job and I'm going to be a full-time content creator. So that is inspired by these action items, but I don't have like a list of these are all the details of what a rich life looks like exactly, or what a miserable life looks like exactly. But I can tell you that the rich life has 100% less meetings than the miserable life does.
Does this count as a meeting? Like you
No,
and me?
no, this does
Okay.
not.
All right. I could see. I'll give it to you, I guess.
Yeah, I'm still kind of thinking this through. I've actually been thinking about like, what do I want my ideal week to look like? Because anytime you go through a major life transition, it's an opportunity to kind of redefine what normal is going to look like. And I've got a blank slate. So I still need to take the time to do that. I've been a little busy with offboarding at the day job. I really do want to make sure that everything is taken care of and there's no surprises after I'm no longer there. And this is just purely, I feel like this is a move I have to make. My oldest son is 15 and a half, right? And he's the one who told me about the pathless path. And I keep telling him, like, you're capable of more, think bigger, take chances, bet on yourself. Well, I got to model it for him. So this is one of those things that I feel if I don't, the time is right, the circumstances are right. Like, I know a ton more about how to do this than I did last time I was in a similar situation. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a position here to be successful with this, and I need to give it a shot, or I will regret it on my deathbed. But all that to say, still have the offboarding stuff with the day job. Still have some of the meetings that I'm responsible for there, podcasts and other things. Wrapping up the school year. In fact, I got to go to an end of year presentation for our classical conversations thing right after this recording. So I haven't had as much time to think about this as I would have liked. When I stated these action items, and the reason I say they're unfinished is because I pictured coming back with a very clear, detailed list of this is what it's going to look like. And I know exactly when I have that, how exciting and compelling that's going to be. But it's not there yet. It probably won't be for another couple of weeks, unfortunately. But I'm moving in this direction, and it is kind of exciting to think about this.
Well, as I look at the things that you had set for your follow-up, like defining all these things and answering these questions, like I don't think I would want to do these because it'd take a lot of time just to put them down on paper in some form. So
it's a lot of thinking time. I don't think it's actually all that much work, but I haven't had the time to sit and think about these things a whole lot yet.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a couple like low-hanging fruit, where I know I'm not going to have to do this in the middle of the day anymore. So I have more flexibility. And usually when I try to squeeze in my run on Tuesdays, I have to cut it short because I got to be back for the leadership meeting and stuff like that. Like I can establish the boundaries where I want them. And that's really exciting to me. But I haven't had the chance to sit through and do that. One of the things I did think through though, and I'm not going to get there right away, but this is where I want to end up. I'm sure I've mentioned on this podcast before, the one-on-ones that I do with my kids. So once a week, I bring one of them to a coffee shop and we play games for an hour, right? And even with my busy schedule, I can squeeze in one of those days a week for that, about 95% of the time. I was thinking, though, like, to find my rich life, wouldn't it be awesome if I could do that every single day, right? Just different kid every day of the week. And I just am at that coffee shop every morning. And then I started thinking through like, well, what would that actually cost? Because a coffee for me, coffee, hot chocolate, whatever for the other kid, it's like $10, right? So if I do that $10 a day, that's $50 a week. If I do 4 weeks in a month, that's $200. And then 12 months in a year, $2,400. And if I did my math right, it sounds like just that single item. You could look at it and be like, oh, it's kind of a lot of money. but $2,400 to have dedicated one-on-one time with each of my kids every single workday, I'd pay $2,400 for that. So I know that's one
Yeah.
thing I want to move towards. It's like I said, there's a lot of things that have to fall into place before I can get to that, but I feel like
Yeah.
it's possible. And yeah, that'll be exciting. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, I know one of the things I've been trying to do is take one of my kids to work with me. I do enough like physical hands-on stuff with my day job that it's possible for me to bring one of them to work with me. And I know like tomorrow my oldest Emma is planning to come with me to work. So I know she's going to be helping me terminate shielded RJ45 ends on our Cat 6 cables for a new soundboard install. So she's going to be helping learn how to do that. And then we're setting up new soundboard stuff. So like she's going to be taking some of that on, but that's 4 or 5 hours I'm going to have with her doing that. So it'll be fun. But yeah, those are like gold times. Like I love having that opportunity to spend that much time with them one-on-one and teaching them the things that I do at work. So, and they love it too. They borderline fight over who gets to go with dad each day that I have to do that. So gotta be careful not to, make it too much of a thing and too much of a fight. But at the same time, it's kind of fun to make that possible. So doing it every single day, I don't think I could pull that off. Not at that scale, but going to have coffee, I could see that. But my schedule would not allow that one. Fun idea though.
Yep, exactly. And that's the whole point, is like, let your mind wander and think about, what's the best thing I can imagine, for this sort of thing. And then realizing that actually, that's a lot more possible than it seemed at first.
Well, cool. Well, on that point, maybe we should step into today's book, because this, I feel like, could either be fairly straightforward and done, or we may end up spending a lot of time on this. I'm not real sure which way this one's going to go. But regardless, today's book is The Almanack of Naval Ravikant. And this is by Eric Jorgensen, which is a little bit of an oddity in itself. Like, this is wisdom and knowledge from Naval, and yet it's put together by Eric. And that part by itself kind of threw me off a little bit at the beginning. It's like, wait a second, wouldn't this be written by the guy that the wisdom is from? So it's a little bit odd in that regard. At the same time, like, this is very highly rated on the Amazon, and a lot of people seem to recommend this book. I can kind of see why, having been through it at this point. Has a foreword by Tim Ferriss, which he broke his own rule in that, because he doesn't write forewords
I
for
can
books.
see why this one's not very good.
Yeah, I kind of thought that too. It's like, huh, interesting. It's kind of lame whenever I read it. It's like, I really wanted this book to exist, and here it exists, and I'm not usually one to do this, but here I am doing it. So here you go. Like, that was kind of my takeaway from the forward. Sorry, Tim Ferriss, but don't do that again, please. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that he broke his own rule for writing forwards for a book. Really wanted a book by Naval to be written, but then ends up writing the forward for a book that's not written by Naval, but it's written by somebody else about him. So a little bit weird in that sense, but regardless, it's a fascinating read. What were your initial thoughts on it, Mike?
It is a fascinating book. Like you said, it is a little bit weird that it's written by somebody else for somebody else. But I think I had never heard of Naval Ravikant before, but after the introduction to him and looking him up on Twitter and looking at his blog, I understand why. If I were to summarize it, he's basically like an angel investor at this point for Silicon Valley companies, but he was originally a like a developer, I think, or a coder, and he just kind of climbed the ranks, and now his name is pretty well known in those circles, and that type of person probably doesn't care if he ever writes a book. He's too busy just absolutely crushing it. So I understand why Eric Jorgensen wrote it. Jack Butcher illustrated it. Tim Ferriss wrote the foreword, because there was no way Naval Ravikant was going to put forth the effort to actually put this together. Now, that could be good or bad, right? This guy could be a complete jerk, and he got lucky a couple times, and we don't want that person like spewing their their philosophies about life into the universe. But that's not the case with this one. I think that's why this one is so highly rated, is that he seems like a pretty level-headed guy. It's a lot of the like straightforward, no nonsense productivity type stuff, but practical applications, and set in a way that feels more approachable, just like you're having a coffee with a friend, as opposed to reading a formal book that, you know, has been edited heavily and has a certain tone to it. I don't know. It feels very approachable, I guess, maybe is the best term. Like, you're not gonna get on Naval Ravikant's calendar to go pick his brain to have coffee, but that's kind of what this feels like. And to some people, they may think that, like, well, why would you ever do that? That sounds stupid anyways. But for me, I think that's awesome. And I would totally do that if I could. I remember being at the Sean West conference when it still existed, and Nathan Barry was presenting. And he shared when he was starting ConvertKit, he had tried several other businesses previously, and he was just trying to get around as many successful people as he could to pick their brains about things. So he would send messages to people he really wanted to meet. And he lives in Boise, Idaho, where ConvertKit is, I believe. And he would send a message to somebody that he really looked up to. He's like, hey, I'm going to be in New York on this day, or this day. Can we get together? I'll buy you lunch. And he sent out a whole bunch of those messages, and then a few people responded, and then he would book the plane ticket and go there. He wasn't actually going to be there, but he just wanted an audience with those big thinkers. And I think that that's really smart. And so this is kind of that in book format.
Yeah, it's so true. It reminds me a lot of, now this is longer, of course, but the book I'm working through, Tim Ferriss, obviously, The Tribe of Mentors, like that one's going to be coming up for me probably quite a bit over the next months, probably, just because of how long that thing is. But it has that feel where you're like getting a peek into somebody's brain and how they process a specific avenue. In this particular case, we're given an insight into Naval's take on wealth and happiness, and that's exactly where he starts on this, is the wealth side of it. It's just a 2-part book. He's not deviating. Well, he is deviating from the 3-part nonsense, I guess, that continues to plague all of the books that we see. That's me being obnoxious. But he does have the 2 parts here. So wealth and happiness. There's a bunch of like little subtitles underneath of it, but there's 2 chapters in the first part, and then there's 3 in the second part. Yeah. So first part, wealth, starts with the chapter called Building Wealth. And there's like a lot of little subtitles here. I didn't write them all down into our outline for today. I'll bring up a few of them here, and then obviously Mike, fill in where you would like. But there's one specific topic here that he starts us off with at the beginning of this Building Wealth section, which is specific knowledge. And this is essentially talents and skills that you enjoy doing and that you become, I guess, world-class at, is my take on how he's intending that. It doesn't have to be quite at that scale, as he gets to a little bit later, but the specific knowledge is a thing where it's stuff you love to do, stuff you're really good at, and that's what creates the leverage, as he'll get into, we'll get into here a little bit later, to then create value for other people, which then drives wealth creation. So this is like the basis of this whole wealth thing, where you've got to have a certain amount of knowledge in an arena before you can start building on these other components. This struck me as very like become an expert in your field ish, more or less. So it's not necessarily that specific, but at the same time, I was like, this is something I feel like I could do. I have some of this, but then what do I do with it? Obviously, he gets into that a little bit later, but I don't know. What's your take on specific knowledge, Mike?
You picked the one thing in here I didn't really like.
Perfect.
So he
Nailed
mentions
it.
that specific knowledge is found by pursuing your innate talents. And that's the part that I kind of take issue with. I mean, you probably do have some innate talents, but it's kind of contrary to the growth mindset that we talk about all the time. And I guess just where I'm at with my current situation and what I've learned in the last year and a half at the day job, it wasn't my innate talents. It was being forced to develop skills. So one of the skills I developed was, for lack of a better term, financial literacy. I took classes on like balance sheets and income statements. I'm not naturally gifted with numbers and finances, but it was a skill that someone at the company needed to have. So I developed it, and now I know how to do it. And I feel like I could help other people do that who also have an aversion to that and don't want anything to do with it. That's very contrary to what he's talking about with specific knowledge. So that's, anti-specific knowledge that actually I feel going into the next season of my life. One of the things that I'm kicking around the idea of doing is being like a business guide for specifically creative entrepreneurs, because creative entrepreneurs, somebody who is making something and it blew up and they can't do it alone. So they start hiring team members, but they don't know anything about scoreboards and getting everyone to pull in the same direction and running Scrum with a team. And then ultimately like reading income statements, balance sheets, understanding cash flow, which is different, all that kind of stuff. I would love to work with people and help them kind of understand that stuff, put systems in place to help them fill in those knowledge gaps. But if I was pursuing specific knowledge, I would not be going there. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So I don't know. I was also thinking about, as I read this section, Ikigai, with the overlap of those concentric circles. There's something there. It's not just, what you can get paid for, what the market wants, what you enjoy doing. Those are places to start. But I think really what it is like capitalizing on opportunities, which is another theme that he talks about a lot in this chapter, because there are opportunities everywhere. And he kind of talks about how the most important skill for getting rich is becoming a perpetual learner. Productize yourself is kind of linked to that specific knowledge. But that's the thing, is like, I don't think you have to zero in quite as far on specific knowledge. So yeah, I have unique experiences with working at a digital marketing company and having experience with the family business and emotional intelligence assessment. And I have been creating for a long time. So like, how do all those things overlap? That's more important to me than what are my innate talents. I don't know. Maybe it's different if you're 18 years old and you're trying to figure out what are you going to do with your career. Maybe the advice is a little bit different there. And if you can figure out what you're really, really good at, then just go ahead and lean into that. But I don't know. I think it's unapproached, but I don't necessarily think it's the best or the right one.
Yeah, two things to kind of follow up on that. The one piece of it that's a little bit strange to me is the concept of innate. It has like this I was born with it mentality, which I think we would both agree is sometimes the case. Like that's the exception. In most cases, it seems like these are skills and expertise that's been trained or developed over many years. Now, that may have begun at age 3. And then by the time you're 18, you're extremely skilled at it because you've got 15 years of experience doing it. That's very possible. But that's not necessarily the norm. That seems to be the thing everybody's like trying to do with their children nowadays, but it's not the common path. There's a lot of competition in that territory, which is why, what is it, page 44, he has a quote, escape competition through authenticity. I love that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. Like it's not competition if I'm truly me in the process. And that's something he does refer to quite a bit here, is like, be yourself. Like, don't be who people tell you need to be. That, I think, is something people get into a lot of trouble with, is this should business, like the things I feel like I should do because of what other people tell me I should be doing, or the expectations that I think I should be living up to, like that just gets in so many. It just creates a lot of problems. So I really like that quote, like escape competition through authenticity. Just be authentic, and the competition doesn't matter because you are who you are. So I really liked that. Um, he does get into this concept of leverage here, where he's going to refer to like this specific knowledge or using labor that you have at your disposal, money, or what was the other one? Products that are easy to replicate. He's just specifically referring to like books, code, code and software, that type of thing that's easy to just replicate. Online courses would fit that category. So having the expertise to build things that then can give you leverage to then go on to the next thing. Like these are all the process of building wealth, is being able to accrue these skills and these products that then can build on themselves. So that one got me thinking a lot about like the video course thing, like the cohort thing, all these people who write code and then it blows up and becomes a big thing like that. That is a very big, real thing that is possible. That's the type of thing he's encouraging you to get into.
Yeah, I love the whole topic of leverage. This was another book, The Pathless Path, talked about how that one kind of struck a chord inside of me. This one also did, and kind of complementary. So he kind of talks about how and this is all building wealth, right? So do I need to be a billionaire? I do not. That is not the thing that is going to make me extremely happy. I also think, though, if you're able to build wealth, you can affect a lot of positive change in the world. So I'm not against it either. And he kind of talks later on about how, like, well, if it's not important to you, you're never going to get it, right? But at this point, when he's talking about building wealth, he says that if you don't own a piece of a business, you don't have a path towards financial freedom. And he didn't say this specifically, but when he said that, kind of what it triggered in my mind was a montage of all the things that I have done in the last 10 years online. Starting with the work with Asian efficiency, and then the suite setup and Sean Blanc, and then the digital marketing stuff. And each step along the way, I learned a ton of skills, and I'm grateful for the time there, but I was always building somebody else's thing. And as I was reflecting on that, I realized that part of the reason I do that is because it's safer. I can make things, and if Sean Blanc's audience likes it, then that's kind of validation, like, hey, you're good at this, right? But it's scary to say, I'm going to do this thing and believe that I can attract an audience like that. So this was very enlightening. I mean, this is not really what he's talking about at all, but what it triggered in me was like an analysis of myself, probably coupled with this life theme cohort stuff. And I was like, I have been playing it safe pretty much my entire life. And do I believe I have the skill to be successful or not? I have a lot of people in my life telling me that, yes, I can be successful. And so I was like, okay, thanks. I appreciate that, but I don't ever do anything with it. So by the time I was reading this, I had already put in my notice at the day job. It did not force that decision. It didn't reinforce necessarily that decision, but it crystallized for me what the next steps kind of look like. I can't go back, right? I've got a Gap book that I'll mention later, but it's called Burn the Boats. And essentially the subtitle is something like, ensure your success by not having a plan B. And that's kind of what I feel like I need to do right now. And that was kind of crystallized because of that one comment from this section. The other thing with the leverage, he talks about he can have classes of leverage, labor, money, but then also products with no marginal cost of replication. Now, he's a developer, so he's talking about like apps and web apps and things like that. I don't have that knowledge, but I can make knowledge products. So when he mentioned that, I started getting a whole bunch of ideas for different types of products to be building. both for like the faith-based productivity brand, and then also, like I mentioned, the business coaching stuff. That's an idea that really intrigues me. I'm going to go to Craft and Commerce shortly, the ConvertKit conference. That's where those people hang out, so I'll be able to get some live feedback and see if that really is something that people are interested in. But the goal, he says, is to be in control of your time. Again, like this is exactly what I needed to hear at the exact time I needed to hear it. Mentions on page 62 that 40-hour work weeks are a relic of the industrial age. I feel like we kind of touched on that a little bit with Pathless Path last time, but I really, I understand and feel compelled now more than ever to really sit down and think about what does the future, my ideal future, look like. You know, we're going to talk about that in week 3 of the Life Theme cohort too. Hopefully I'll have some details by then. I've got an old version, but it needs to be revised. I need to follow my own advice here. Talk about this on Friday. Think bigger, right? What would it look like if I couldn't fail? What would it look like if fear wasn't holding me back? What would it look like if I didn't have obligations that kept me from taking chances? Not that you just chuck it and whatever, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. But I don't know. I think I've given up too quickly on some of these things previously, and I'm excited by another chance to give it a shot.
Page 84, he starts talking about luck and how to make luck, like different types of luck anyway. One of the things he mentions is that luck finds you if you're the best at a thing. And this is interesting, like getting asked to do, like, here's an example from my world. I run sound for very large events at times. And because I've developed that skill set, whenever there are things that come along inside my friend group where they need somebody to run sound for, say, paid talent, and then it becomes a paid gig, like I'm one of the first people they talk to about doing that. And yet I have a few friends that are like trying to break into that world to get paid to do those gigs and want to make that their thing. And I was like, man, you always get asked to run these things. I'm like, well, I run for way bigger things. So then people see that, and then it ends up meaning like your skill level is significantly higher than what they need. So I don't always run those things when I get asked to, just because I don't have the time to just go run for a 40-person event, and they're not going to pay what it would require for me to go do that. So it doesn't make sense. So I'll pass them off to these other friends. But like I get the luckiness of being asked to do that because of a skill set that I've built up. Now that's a very small scale compared to what he's referring to in the scheme of things, but it's that concept. Like if you get really good at a certain skill set, you can become the person that people go to, and it makes it look like you're super lucky to get those opportunities, when really it's just you've gotten good at something and then people want you to do it more, but for them, which makes it look like luck.
Yeah, I like the section on luck. The first 3 are basically lower level versions, I feel, which is kind of the intention. Hope luck finds you, hustle till you stumble, prepare the mind, and be sensitive to changes others miss. But then the last one is the one that we should be striving for: become the best at what you do, which again I would argue doesn't necessarily have to do with your innate talent, but whatever. The other things I liked from this chapter were the 3 big decisions early in life: where you live, who you're with, and what you do. I feel like that is important, but he over indexes, I think, on where you live. Part of that is based on my experience as a now full-time content creator living in Wisconsin. Like, there's not a bunch of people hanging out here. If I was going to hang out with these people, I would probably move to like Austin, Texas. That's where it seems like that kind of crowd hangs out. There's probably other places too. But the bottom line is that you don't have to be there. There are digital places like that where you can live, quote unquote. And there are advantages to not living in those places. I became aware of that when I was at the retreat. with the mastermind guys because my cost of living is way, way less than someone who lives in some of those other places. And that means that I can reach the same audiences online. The internet doesn't care where people live. So my run rate basically is a lot lower than it would be if I lived somewhere differently. But there are advantages to being around those people. He's thinking of Silicon Valley, and yeah, absolutely, those people all being in the same place, that definitely was a catalyst to that whole thing being what it was. But the last thing he mentioned in this chapter, well, last thing I jotted down, I really love: the closer you want to get to me, the better your values have to be. I think I'm gonna implement some sort of filter like that. Nothing official, but I feel like when I meet somebody new, it can go a couple of different ways. If I feel like they're kind of trying to figure out what I want to hear and appeal to me, basically, that's a big red flag. I don't have a better way to describe that, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like they're a chameleon and they're trying to like fit the scenario and use the right words. And I don't know, you can see right through that. So be who you are, and then we'll see if we're a match, and we'll hang out some more. But yeah, those people who just try to like fake it, the lack of authenticity just absolutely drives me nuts. So
Yep.
I think a version of this everyone should implement, but it's going to become part of the Mike Schmitz test for sure.
I think that actually goes back to that quote I mentioned earlier, the escape competition through authenticity. Like, it's seen kind of as a competition in social situations, which is what I've noticed. Like, getting into certain circles where people are like, they want to be a part of a conversation, so then they start trying to inject a story that is kind of related but not really. And if you know your stuff, then you're very aware that that story has nothing to do with what you're talking about, but they really want to be a part of it. So it just feels very, very fake. But it's because they're like trying to compete and trying to do the whole social status thing. I can't stand it, but I get why people do it too.
This episode of Bookworm is brought to you by Headspace, mindfulness meditation made simple. The last few years have taught us just how important our mental health is to our overall state of well-being. I myself suffered a minor panic attack last winter and inspired me to take this a little bit more seriously. Now, I've had an on-again, off-again relationship with mindfulness meditation in the past. It's never really stuck, but I decided it was time to get serious, so I went back to Headspace. And what I love about Headspace is how approachable they make everything. I didn't have 30 minutes a day to sit on a cushion, and that's okay, because with Headspace, even when you've only got a few minutes to get in the right headspace, there are programs that you can do on the go when you're pressed for time. And I found that just doing a quick 3 to 5 minute mindfulness meditation at the beginning of my day helped me focus before I sat down on my computer and went to work. It really made a big difference, and it helped me stay calm as I went through my workday. And that's because Headspace combines scientifically proven benefits of meditation and mindfulness with modern practices through their experienced meditation teachers, with customized, personalized approaches to help you navigate through all of life's moments, big and small. Now, Headspace has helped me and more than 100 million people worldwide, and they can help you too. So listen up, you don't want to miss this. We've got something special for you. For a limited time, you can try Headspace free for 60 days by going to headspace.com/bookworm60, bookworm60. You won't find this offer anywhere else. You have to use this link, Headspace, headspace.com/bookworm60 to unlock all of Headspace free for 60 days. This is not something they normally do. So head over to headspace.com/bookworm60 now.
Well, let's go into the next chapter here. Underneath of this, building wealth, part 1. The second chapter in this part is building judgment. So the first one was building wealth, and then building judgment. It's interesting to me that that's captured underneath of the wealth half of this, that judgment is such a big deal when it comes to wealth building, because you're making some high level decisions. There's a quote here towards the beginning of this chapter, just trying to understand, like, what is he referring to when he's talking about judgment. and he does define it, at least in his terms. At least Eric's defining it on behalf of Naval, I think, using some of Naval's words. That part's still a little weird to me. Anyway, this is page 94. Wisdom is knowing the long-term consequences of your actions. Wisdom applied to external problems is judgment. So building the wisdom of being able to understand what are the consequences of something, specifically your actions, what are the long-term consequences of the actions that you are taking, and then applying that knowledge of those external consequences, those long-term consequences, and applying that to problems. That's judgment, which I get. The more I've thought about that, I was like, I really like some of that definition there. But having the wisdom and having the ability to make good judgments is critical to building wealth. I think that's the clean way of saying why that is in this particular section. But shortly after that, this will take us all the way back to what you're talking about in follow-up, Mike. He refers to having time to think for yourself, because many people who have high values and build high amounts of wealth, large amounts of wealth, think for themselves even when they have experts tell them what to do or what the answer should be. They will still want to process everything themselves. They want to understand it in details. Like that I can appreciate, because there are many times when someone will tell me, this is the best way to do this. And I regularly want to say, why? And it drives people crazy. And part of this is me adopting my wife's habits, because Becky does this to me constantly. Like, why would you do that? It's like, the wood needs stacked. Who cares how I stack it? Like, you don't need to ask me why. Like, just, I gotta stack wood. It doesn't matter. So I get that. Like, asking why and trying to quiz and work through even what the experts tell you can sometimes be frustrating for the other person. But if you're trying to build wisdom and develop good judgment, it's a critical step. It's an important part of the process.
Yeah. I didn't jot down nearly as much in this section as I did the previous one, but there were some related concepts that I really liked. You talked about how smart thinkers are clear thinkers. And that one is challenging, because the more you study some of these concepts that we read about in these books, the more it becomes clear as mud, right? And that's kind of the natural first step, additional information, and how does this connect? And you lose the clarity, and then you got to put in the effort and figure out where all the pieces fit. And then that part is even subjective, because you define it for yourself. But that really is the thing that makes people smart. And I like that. He also talks about how the more desire that we have for something to work out a certain way, the less likely we are to see the truth. And there was a lot in here about like this whole idea of judgment is like right versus wrong. That's kind of the picture I get in my head, especially with some of the application that you were talking about there. But ultimately, the thing that kind of stood out to me from this section was that you kind of just have to let it go. The more you're just okay with the way things are, the less stressed out about things you are. And that kind of gets into the next section on happiness too, but you can see the seeds of it starting here. I remember hanging out with the guys at the retreat, and one of them had mentioned they were listening to somebody, and I'm blanking on the name, but this big name guru guy, and people are kind of just not, you can tell like they want the answer to life, and he's kind of sharing stuff and it's not really landing. So in the middle of the thing, he's like, you want to know the real secret? Everybody's like, yeah, what's the real secret? He's like, I don't mind what happens. That's kind of what I think the message for me from this chapter is, because he mentions like tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. Doesn't mean you just accept who you are and you don't try to get better, But I think in the past I've been guilty of anchoring too much on like this is who I should be. There's those shoulds again, right? And he does talk about how you need to get rid of those. There's some other things that I liked from this section, but that was the big one. Is like, dude, just chill out a bit.
Yeah. Yep. There's a couple more here, like how to build good judgment. One was to collect mental models, which, we have a thing around mental models. The other one, page 113, read a lot.
Yep.
Can get on board with that. That's very quickly followed up with a statement and a quote that I wrote down. If they wrote it to make money, don't read it. How many times have we picked up a book and we're like, this feels like a sales pitch for X, Y, and Z? It's like that right there summarizes why I feel like we get frustrated with those books. Like it's just it's not to share information and knowledge, which is the way that this one's written. This Almanack of Naval Ravikant was written in a way to share knowledge. It's not a pitch for any sales thing whatsoever. I think you'd actually have to do some digging to find some way to actually give money to either one of these guys. But that might explain why we don't necessarily care for those books. So I now have a reasonable justification because Naval said I shouldn't read it because they're trying to make money off of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not necessarily bad to make money off of the ideas, but I totally understand what he's getting at here. I think like one of the things that comes to mind from this, you mentioned we've read books like this, so let's just call a few of them out here, shall we?
Sure, why not?
The one that stands out to me the most is the 12-week year, which I actually really like that idea, but it doesn't need to be the length of the book that it is. And it's not just that book. Now they've got the 12-week year for writers, which I bought, right? Because you keep thinking there's going to be some additional context here. And really, they're just looking for additional ways to make revenue from that single idea. And the people who have the really great ideas, they aren't necessarily the best salespeople. If you get a good idea and you are a great salesperson, you will spin off 12 different versions of this sort of thing. Biggest example I can find of this, by the way. Do you know who Dan Kennedy is?
No, I don't know that name.
Dan Kennedy is kind of like a digital marketing guy from back in the day, is my understanding. And he's got a book that I bought, I haven't started it yet, called The Ultimate Sales Letter. But then there's like 20 something different versions of that for individual niches. And if you search for Dan Kennedy on Amazon, you'll see a whole bunch of these that are just applied to different markets. And on one level, like that's smart because if you're speaking directly to somebody in a specific situation, then maybe you have the credibility that you can actually solve their problem. I don't know. But when you do a Google search or an Amazon search and you see all of these different flavors of the same idea, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Now, contrast that with, like I said, I have never heard of Naval Ravikant before, but this guy just seems wicked smart. And some of the stuff that he says in here, it's almost like passing comments. And it's like, if you really knew how profound that was, you would expound on it for another 150 pages because some people do that. He's just like, whatever, on to the next thing. Right.
Yeah.
That's the way I want to be, is like, this was a good idea. Cool. I can write about it a bunch. I can help people out with it, but I'm not going to anchor on that. I'm on to the next thing. There's always going to be a next thing. Now, he does talk about the way he reads books, which I think I have a little bit of an issue with.
I didn't even write it down. I don't even know why. I probably should have, but I didn't write it down. I remember the section you're talking about, but I can't place any of it in my brain right now.
Well, he basically skims a lot. He could learn something from Mortimer Adler and how to read a book. So Naval, if you're listening, I recommend you go skim that book and then come back and reassess your approach to reading here. I agree with some of his ideas. Basically, that like there's too many books out there. So if you're reading a book and it's a slog and you don't think you're going to get anything from it, feel free to put it down. I mean, the only reason we follow through is because we have to talk about them on a podcast. Some of them,
That's true.
Some of them, I'm sure, like you absolutely love them, and I'm so glad Joe picked this book. But truth be told, there are some where I'm like, Joe, why did you pick this one? And now I got to finish it.
That does go both ways, by the way.
Yeah, I know it does. But in general, if you don't have a podcast you do every 2 weeks, talk about books, like you can put it down and move on to the next one. There's plenty of other books out there. Now, one tip I will give people, I think I might have mentioned this recently, but this, I think this is like brilliant life advice. And I've told this to a couple other people in real life. And some of them are like, oh, that's so great, I'm going to do this. And others, you can just tell it like goes right over their head. When you are around somebody who is smart that you look up to and they recommend a book, buy it instantly. Take out your phone, go to Amazon, place the order, right? Because what will happen is you will collect a bunch of these books that are in your environment, in your home. And when you're looking for the next thing to read after you develop this reading habit, you will have a bunch of great material available to you. So you've already done the filtering out of the junk, and there's just always going to be something there. Now, if you start something and it doesn't really do it for you, like Naval is saying, feel free to move on to the next one. But that I feel like that's the big question a lot of people have is like, well, what should I read? And a lot of people will go search the internet for like the top 10 lists. And I mean, I've got that on my website, try to help people out as a starting place. But really, like the people who you look up to, they have certain knowledge, they've gotten it certain places, and they're basically revealing to you where they got it when they recommend these books. So buy them and don't trust that you're going to go to the library and get them later. You won't, you'll forget, right? Which is why you need to place the order and have it show up at your house. And yes, it's $15 a book, $20 a book. Even if you buy 3 or 4 of these books a month, that's not that big of an investment. And it's an investment in your future. Like these ideas are going to compound and they're going to create a better life for you. You got me going on this reading stuff, but there are a couple other things I wanted to mention here. He says,
I wasn't trying to.
Yeah.
For the record.
Yeah, it's okay. Praise specifically, but criticize generally. This is brilliant advice that, again, there could be like whole books written on this and why this is the right approach. But this is one of those things that can quickly just kind of fly under the radar. And I wanted to call out. So basically, if somebody does something well, you say, good job, Joe, right? But if someone makes a mistake, you say, you know what, bookworm team, we need to do better. And I literally had an opportunity to practice this because the intentional family episode that I mentioned earlier with the audio from the life theme call, that was not the audio we had intended to release this week. That's all I will say.
All right.
But I was reading this and I kind of understood this previously, but this was good reinforcement. Had to address a couple things, right? So I tried to do it in a way where it's like, you know what, guys, because Rachel had created the content, Toby had done the editing. The end result was this audio that I was supposed to publish, right? And I sent it to him and guys, listen to this. Would you want to come back for another episode after listening to this one? Tell me honestly. And if you think it's, top quality, then it's the best we could do. We'll go ahead and we'll release it. But personally, I think we can do a little bit better. So we had to scramble and figure something out, but it was a cool learning opportunity. And I feel like everyone kind of got it. It's like, oh yeah, we have an obligation to the listener to deliver something of value. Like it's not a light thing that people are giving us their time to listen to this. Right. There's so much information out there. There's so many other podcasts out there, so many other things that you could be doing, so many other things that you could be listening to. We want to make sure that we're delivering the goods. And yeah, it was cool because I wasn't criticizing a specific person. You should have done it this way and you should have done it that way. It's like, team, this just isn't good enough.
Right. Yes. I get it. That's really good advice. The whole praise specifically, criticize generally. Like it does go a very long way. I I don't think I could have explained it in those terms as Naval has in very. A side note, he was an early investor in Twitter, and he loves Twitter. He has a whole section in the back of like Twitter people to follow,
Hmm.
and how he likes the platform because you have to think a lot harder about how to say something in such a short space. So he really likes it in that sense. Anyway, back to the criticism thing. Like I don't think I could have explained it in that way, but I know that it's generally been a practice of mine whenever we have like our video crew or our slide crew. It's like, okay, how'd this morning go? And I'm like, well, I didn't do this or I didn't do that. It's like, well, if you know specifics, you can go after that, but just know like I feel like it could have been improved overall, and I feel like you know what you need to do in order to do a good job for the next time. By the way, you did an amazing job hitting those slides and the timing and stuff whenever Dave was doing his announcements piece, because that's not always easy to do with Dave. So good job on that. Like that concept, that construct of what I just gave you is just a general criticism of this was not great down to you nailed this specific thing. Like that I don't remember where I learned that. I've had a manager at some point explain that construct to me, and I've just kind of adopted it for a long time now. But Naval says it significantly better than I probably could have ever summarized it in that very short phrase. So kudos to him on that.
Yep. Yep. He's also a big fan of Farnham Street, and this is where my
Yes.
single action item comes from. I put join Farnham Street membership ? But I have already joined it.
Already done. Good
Yeah.
job. All right, let's improve our happiness and go on to part 2 here, which is happiness, which starts with a chapter that I didn't write down the title of. Learning happiness. There we go. It starts with an interesting statement that has kind of given me pause, and then I processed, and I kind of want your thoughts on this, Mike. But he states that happiness is learned, and that happiness is a default state when nothing is missing or wanted. That's my summarization, not his exact words. So happiness is learned, and it is a default state when nothing is missing or wanted. And to clarify that last little bit, it's like if there's nothing missing, like for example, if someone passes away, you are now missing that person. So if nothing is missing, but you're also not envious of a thing, like you're content with where you are, that's the default state of happiness. I think that's ultimately what he's referring to. That actually has given me great pause in just kind of realizing that in that short phrasing there, that if I'm unhappy, it's generally because of some mindset that I have latched onto, not the external circumstances. So the external is not at fault. Getting a nicer car, getting a more property around our house, like those things do not matter. That is not applicable to happiness. It's purely my perception on the situation. What's your take on this, Mike? Like, do you think he's off his rocker, or is he onto something here?
I think he's on to something. I wrote it a little bit differently. He said happiness is a choice. He
Yeah.
mentions that a lot of our unhappiness comes from comparing things from the past to the present. And the fundamental delusion is that there's something out there that will make me happy and fulfilled forever. So I do think that a lot of this is mindset. And it doesn't matter if you are in our situation or further along or not as far along in terms of, he's quite a bit further along in the pursuit of wealth, right? But that doesn't translate necessarily to achieving happiness. The more that you have, potentially, the more that you want. And so really what he's saying is you got to learn to let that desire go in order to really be happy. And I think that I don't know exactly what I think. I have to think about this more, but I think this really challenged me. He mentions that desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get the thing that you want. And I can totally see how I've done that in the past. I also think that that's kind of just the way that society and culture is forces us down by default. So I really liked what he said on page 141 about how the real winners are the ones who step out of the game entirely. I don't know exactly how to do that. I've already kind of made the first step, I suppose, by not having a normal job, right? Full-time content creator, and figuring out even like with that, there's certain things that if you just look at the way other people are doing things, you could be like, oh, well, I'll do that the same way. But I feel like I could do that, but then I'll desire, greater results or things like that. I have to decide for myself, what is the real right way to do this. And once I figure that out, then the real challenge is just staying in the moment. Yeah, I want to work hard and build things that I'm proud of, but happiness not being tied to an outcome, I think, is really important. And I need to figure out exactly what that looks like for me, but challenged to do that based on this section of the book.
Yeah, he's got like you said, success does not earn happiness. It is a choice. I also wrote down like envy is the enemy when it comes to happiness. And also one that I think you'll resonate with, happiness is built by habits. Go habits. And then, it's interesting, like that can come from a lot of things, from building the habit of like mindfulness, which I think we'll get into a lot more in the book I've picked for 2 books from now, and trying to just realize that, again, the way that I think about a situation, the way I perceive it, the way I choose to view the situation is more often the determiner when it comes to my own personal happiness. So if I'm willing to think about a situation as a way to learn, as opposed to how terrible I did and how I failed at something, like those are 2 different games. Like that's 2 different ways of considering something. Like if I failed to mix something correctly on a soundboard, that's not me completely failing at running sound for that whole event. That's me finding something I need to improve on and that I can grow in later. That's all in perception. It's all in your brain. The exact same scenario, 2 completely different outcomes. So, like being willing to admit that happiness is my own responsibility and not an external circumstance. It's kind of tough to come to grips with that. At least I find like that it means that if I'm not happy, it's my own fault. Like I don't want to take credit for that. I want to blame somebody else. It's way more fun if I can blame somebody else. But if it's my own
That's true.
fault, well, I'm the only one that can be responsible for changing it then, which is both encouraging and slightly disheartening at the same time.
Yeah, I mean
Disheartening is a strong word there, but
that's the next chapter. Actually, take responsibility for fixing yourself. But
yep.
Yeah, the enemy of peace of mind. He says are expectations drilled into you by society and other people. So you got to figure out what it is that winning looks like for you, because life is a single player game. That kind of is building on an idea from earlier. I think it was maybe the first chapter about how wealth is not a zero sum game. Status is. There can only be one person who's at the top of the mountain. But when it comes to wealth, just because somebody else is successful doesn't mean that you can't be. So you can't look at what other people are doing when determining what winning looks like for you personally. He also talks in this section about how you're a combination of your habits and the people you spend the most time with. That's an interesting way to phrase it, but also like learning happiness and not having that associated with an outcome necessarily. Kind of sounds like he doesn't believe in goals either. And then there's this thing he calls the trifecta. I've seen this illustrated previously, but this is pretty great. When you are young, he says that you have time and you have health, but you have no money. When you are middle-aged, you have health and money, but you have no time. And when you are old, you have money and time, but you have no health. And really, the goal is to have all three of those at the at the same time. So it's really just describing like the default way that people's existence is, and you should be challenging that and thinking about how you can tweak it. But when it comes to the way that things are and the habits that you have, you've got three options. You can change it, you can accept it, or you can just leave it. Just this isn't something that's worthy of my attention, and I'm not going to stress out about this. I'm just going to let it go and go do something else.
Yeah, we're kind of jumping into the second chapter. I'm going to just introduce it quick since we're like halfway through it at this point. But saving yourself is the second of the three chapters in this happiness section, which is what we've kind of talked about, is taking responsibility for yourself. He does talk about like diet, exercise, and meditation here, and covers a handful of different types of meditation. That part, I specifically called that one out because, and I didn't call out all of them in my notes, but the quintessential, here's what you think of whenever you think of meditation, like somebody cross-legged sitting on the floor, focusing on their breath. Like that concept of meditation was just one of a bank of types of meditation that he called out, from walking meditations to accidental meditations because you're in the shower. Like those also count. It made me wonder if this is why I've struggled with meditation in the past. Maybe this is in your camp as well, Mike, because like we've got enough other things where these different types of meditation maybe play into our daily routines, that it's possible that that's actually happening just in a different way. So that I thought was interesting. And then he has the Scott Adams quote in here: set up systems, not goals.
Yeah.
Again, love that, right? We talk about that one quite a bit. Like this is a thing that I'd love to do, is like, let me build systems. I may not be the greatest at using the system once I have it built, but I really like to build it, which is a weird, problematic situation for me personally, but it's the way it goes. So yeah, save yourself.
Yeah. He talks about several different types of meditation and basically confesses that none of them really have clicked for him. But I do think that the way he describes the mind being a muscle and being able to observe your mental state, he is more of a meditator than he gives himself credit for. He kind of talks about how like that mindfulness aspect can manifest different ways. And that was kind of interesting. I've always kind of thought that for myself. It's probably why mindfulness meditation is not ever completely stuck for me, because it's so focused on your breathing or the guided meditations. And the version of that kind of works for me is my prayer habit. I pray every single day. And that is a form of meditation he talks about. And it was kind of cool to get the validation of that, from him. He talks about how meditation is kind of like intermittent fasting for the mind. I think that's a cool idea. And so it's something that you maybe don't need to do all the time. I'm sure there are other people who would argue with that. He kind of talks about maybe this is just a result of the culture that he's a part of in Silicon Valley, but that he doesn't know anybody who is really consistent with it. I think I do know some people who are really consistent with it. But yeah, I think the big takeaway from this is to continue to try to train my mind. And there are other things that can go along with that. Journaling is another thing, things like that. But the other thing that I like from here is that most of our suffering, he talks about, comes from avoidance. And I think that when we try so hard to not do something, and this is really coming from anchoring on like this outcome is good and this outcome is bad. When you do that and you try to avoid the bad outcome all the time, you're not going to be able to, at least 100% of the time. And so the fact that you can't avoid it, that causes suffering, and is the way that he would describe it. And I think I'm guilty of this. Even a lot of the stuff that isn't realized, I tend to be a worst case scenario thinker. I hesitate to label myself pessimistic versus optimistic. There was actually an interesting John Maxwell podcast on this recently, where optimism is like a learned trait. Like you can kind of naturally think about the negative things, but you don't have to like let your mind stay there. You're constantly trying to direct it towards something that's healthier, and that's something that I definitely definitely need to do, because given just letting my mind run on its own, it's gonna create this sensationalized picture of how the world is falling apart. And there are certain people in my life that I recognize are not helping with that. So be careful who you surround yourself with. To his earlier point, who are you allowing to speak into your life? But the big takeaway from this section for me is to just keep trying. Right? It's never going to be perfect. Progress, not perfection. And really, the win comes from not giving up.
Let's jump into the last one here, because then we can tie things off in a nice little pretty bow. But it's philosophy is the last chapter of this happiness section, and he gets into like meanings of life, which I didn't really follow his very well. Like this was I think he missed the mark here scenario. He did have a section shortly after that about living by values. That I can definitely get behind. Like having these statements or these constructs that he's not going to deviate from. This is maybe similar to what you were talking about earlier with, if you don't have a certain level of a standard or values, like you're not going to get too close to me, like that idea, right? It kind of fits into that territory where if something isn't following by one of your values, it's an instant no situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting to me. And I'll save this last bit for the end of this, but that particular piece, to live by values, is one that, and I know we've had like Principles or by Ray Dalio. This kind of has some of that feel, Naval's style of sorts here. Not specifically, but generally speaking. But that is very appealing to me. I'm not real sure what to do with that one as far as like an action item goes, but it is an interesting idea to just have these statements like, I'm not going to do this if this, and this, I'm not going to do that. Like those are the ideas there. But anyway, I really like that concept.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't really care for the meaning of life part here. He talks about there's 4 options, but I didn't think any of them were very good, so I didn't write them down.
I didn't either. Yeah.
The big takeaways for me from this section are to live by your values, and that all benefits in life come from compound interest. That's an idea he kind of talked about in the previous part, wealth, I think, and he's talking about judgment maybe and relationships. How if you wouldn't work with someone for forever, then you shouldn't work with them for a day. Basically, like you want to find people who align with your values, and then you just want to do life with them. And by maintaining those relationships with the right people, that will compound to have benefit for you throughout the rest of your life, essentially. So I think that's a really cool idea, really good advice. Just be careful who you're surrounding yourself with. And then related to that, he talks about anger being a hot coal that you hold in your hand before you throw it at somebody. That was a powerful image. And I don't know that I get angry all that often, but I do get frustrated quite a bit. So part of that is probably me being around wrong people. Part of that is I'm letting things bother me that shouldn't be bothering me. So I can feel that like starting to rise in me certain times, and it never manifests as anger, and I lash out at people. But I do want to just notice that and then chill, right? Because don't mind what happens. Don't let anything steal your happiness. Um, the takeaways from here, he mentions kind of in closing that the present is all we have, right? So don't live for tomorrow or for someday. But then the other thing is inspiration is perishable. So act immediately. This kind of gets into the whole idea of motivation, but I really like this. Essentially, another way to say this would be like, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, but you're not always going to feel like it. So, what do you do in those situations? Do you just force yourself to muscle through anyways? There's got to be a better way to do that. And so, I think if you follow a lot of the advice that he's talking about here, you're going to create this environment where you're motivated to do the things that, in his words, are your specific knowledge, your innate talents, right? But it doesn't have to be that necessarily. But over time, I do get this picture of you can create this environment where you are doing things that are of high value. They're things that you really want to do because of the impact that you're able to make in the world, and you're able to do them with people that you enjoy working with. And you can do that over and over and over again. There's momentum that gets built there. And if you can figure out what the things are that you can do now that are going to move you in that direction, those are the things that as soon as you get inspired and you see how that connects, do that right away. You don't have to do it all, but what's one thing that you can do right now? It's going to move you towards that picture, that future that you want to have.
That was the last note that I had written down. The inspiration is perishable. Act on it immediately. And I just took that as, here's your book. Here's all of the inspiration you should need to get moving. Act on it right now, because that inspiration will slowly dissipate. Or in some cases, it will quickly dissipate. So
Yep.
get to moving, which is maybe a good place for us to move on to action items, unless there's something else you would like to
Nope.
bring up
I'm
here.
good.
I have one, and I know you and I talked about this last week off mic, as something that I was working on, and it was partially because I had started this book, but I'm in the process of starting to write some blogs again. And I've got a couple of those written. I've not released them as of this recording, but by the time this episode goes live, those will start to hit the website. So joebulig.com, where else would I put it, right? So Joe's going to start blogging again, and a little bit different flavor. First one or two is going to be kind of in my old mentality, but I'm kind of transitioning some of what I'm writing about. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is partially the inspiration from Naval here, is like, okay, there's a lot that I could share. I have a lot of things that I want to write about from my voice, and that could potentially lead into some other things. So that's the easiest starting point that I can provide for myself. So I'm going to head down that path.
Cool.
Super fun.
Awesome.
What about you?
I just have the one, which I mentioned already when I read it, was to consider joining the Farnham Street membership, which is not cheap. I think it's $150 a year. However, I have since joined. The reason is that the Farnham Street, I just really like the stuff that they put out. We've covered the Great Mental Models, Volume 1 and 2 previously, but there are, it's also a blog that I enjoy, and I find myself going back to over and over again. So there's obviously additional content there. There's also a couple courses that they offer, like the Art of Reading, which I want to see obviously what they have to say about that. And really just the quality of the ideas I feel in this book was very high. There was a lot of signal, not much noise. So I kind of am left with the impression that Naval Ravikant is a really great thinker, and he thinks that these people are really great thinkers. So I'm going to surround myself with other people who are good thinkers in the attempt to become a better thinker myself. So that's also interesting timing for me. I mentioned with leaving the day job. I know that when it comes to creating, garbage in, garbage out, right? So at the very least, higher quality ideas are going to spur more interesting things that I make. So it's an investment in the types of things that, not just the podcast episodes like this, but other things that I'll be creating. Yeah, I think this is an investment in the future.
Cool stuff. Well, let's jump into style and rating. And I have to say, the style of this is a little bit strange from a holistic stance. From a down in the technicals of the writing, this is really well written. It's a little strange in that this is not written by Naval, despite the fact that we're talking about Naval the whole time. This is written by Eric Jorgensen, who has mostly compiled, but also put his own words into this. So it's a little bit strange in that sense. I must say that Eric has done a good job of putting this together in this way, because like I had a really hard time knowing like what did he write versus what did Naval say and what did Naval write. There's lots of citations there, so he's telling you exactly where he got all of this information. So it's strange in the sense that I'm not used to reading a book so point blank by someone, but yet has a different author. Like it just has a weird flavor to it from that stance. So it's easy. I found it very easy to lose track of, wait, is this Eric or is this Naval? Like it got to be pretty easy to lose track of that. That particular point aside, I really, really liked the book. I really liked the way it was put together. Naval has tons of tweets that are embedded in here, and they have their own formatting, which makes it easy to figure out when it is a tweet by Naval. So then you know those words are from him. So I really enjoyed that process and make the fact that was very easy to tell. Naval has a lot of great wisdom to share here and does a good job putting it together. There's just some strange, like, what's with the meanings of life thing? Like, it just seems very odd. Like, your actual content there is just, like, your viewpoint there seems way off to me. Like, I didn't even really grasp what his, like, he has one of the points there that is, like, his way of saying that someone has meaning in life, and it had to do with some scientific evolution thing that I didn't follow. So anyway, that aside, there's a lot you can get from this. Absolutely, this is something I feel like people should pick up. Obviously, keep on a little bit of a discerning filter here with some of this stuff if you're coming from a faith background, because he has a strong belief on the evolution train. So that all said, as far as a rating goes, like, I absolutely loved it. There's just a few qualms I have with it, so I'm going to put it at 4.5. I mean, it's a pretty solid book. Really, really happy I picked this one up. So I was glad I got to drag you along on this one. But the real question is, what'd you think of it, Mike?
I enjoyed it a lot. There were some things that, you got to pick out what you're going to keep. And I think if you were to talk to Naval Ravikant himself, he would say the same thing. Like, don't just blindly accept everything that I'm going to say. This is all just based off of my experience, but here's everything that I know. There's no fluff in this book. It's great. I like the formatting of the embedding the Twitter stuff. So there's things that they use for specific tweets, but then also he has these like tweet storms or threads essentially. And even those are formatted in a way that you know exactly where they're coming from. And it's really well done. I really like the visuals. There's not as many as I thought there might be, but I like Jack Butcher's style. I will join you at the 4.5. I don't think it's, one of those books that's completely life-changing. I'm definitely going to be different from this moment forward, but there's definitely the possibility of that, some of these ideas. It's kind of weirdly formatted, and there's certain things that he's obviously more skilled speaking to than others, but I don't fault them for including anything that they've included in here. It's 200 some pages, and feels like if you were to address all these things, it could have been a lot longer. There are a couple bonus sections in my book of, you mentioned like the Twitter people to follow and the books that he recommends you read. I don't necessarily recommend the same books, but whatever. I think anyone in the bookworm audience, if you've listened to more than a handful of episodes, you're going to enjoy reading this one. It's going to move pretty quickly, and it's not going to be a huge time investment. But Yeah, it's a very, very good book that I had never heard of before, and I am very glad that you picked it.
Cool, cool. All right, let's shelf it. What's next, Mike?
Next is The Gap versus the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. This is a recommendation from Carol last time when I had no idea what I was going to pick. So thank you for the suggestion, Carol. And this is an idea that I've talked about a bunch of times, and I'm really looking forward to having a in-depth conversation about it with you.
Yeah, it'll be good. I just started this one this morning, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. It'll be a good one
Awesome.
for sure. Following that, this particular book has a fairly decent section on like mindfulness and meditation in it. I wasn't wanting to go down the let's pick up a book on meditation route, but I found one that has been hitting my radar for close to a year now, even though Mike has never heard of this one either, it sounds like. The Things You Can Only See When You Slow Down. This is by Heyman Sunam. And I have to say this one has shown up quite a bit. It's rated roughly the same as the one we just covered, the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. So it's in that same territory rating-wise, at least from what I'm seeing. So I feel like it should be a good one to cover, but I also feel like in my life things continue to ratchet up speed-wise, and I keep wanting to slow down. So this is maybe a bit of a selfish, I feel like I need this right now, and I want some accountability and support around it from all of you amazing bookworm people. So please help me slow down a little bit. That's my hope.
That's fair.
How about Gap books, Mike?
Well, I did have a Gap book. I'm not done with this one yet, but I mentioned it earlier. I'm not sure where this came on my radar, but it was one of the recent books that we read, and I trusted the source. And that is Burn the Boats by Matt Higgins. Toss Plan B overboard and unleash your full potential. A little bit of a sensational title there. And I had some people flipping through it, and they made the comment, this guy seems like he's kind of full of himself. So far it's pretty good. The thing that got me on this was that one of the blurbs at the front is by Adam Grant, which I really enjoyed the Adam Grant book that we read. So I'm trusting that it's going to pick up a little steam here as we go. But yeah, just seems like a theme for me right now in this season of reinvention. You know, what am I going to be when I grow up? Hopefully this will help me figure it out. What about you?
I don't really have a Gap book this time around. I kind of jumped straight from the Almanac into the Gap versus the Gain. So not really any of them this time that I'll mention. But I will mention that I love our Bookworm Pro members because they are freaking awesome. And I'm always very grateful that people are willing to support us financially to help keep the lights on here at Bookworm. So we've been at it for just shy of 7 years at this point, which is kind of hard to get my head around at this point. Like episode 170. Wow. That's a lot of books and a lot of time. So thank you to those of you who have continually supported us and helped us to keep the lights on here. We absolutely could not do it with all of you amazing listeners. So thank you for that. If you haven't already, head over to club.bookworm.fm and join the club there. It's completely free to join that. If you want to get access to the MindNode files that Mike has put together and some extra perks like the bootleg episode or the ad-free version and such, like if you're interested in any of that, you can join the pro membership, which will get you access to all of those special things. So again, thank you to all of you who listen, and especially to those of you who are Bookworm Pro members.
Awesome. If you are reading along with us, pick up The Gap versus the Gain, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.